Hello everyone, welcome to yet another day in this clown decade, the decade where things are only going to get worse before they get better. And today we are going into why Ed Miliband is probably the biggest liar in the government at the moment. So as everyone knows, Ed Miliband is on this absolute crazed lunatic mission to try and get the UK onto net zero as quickly as possible. We're talking in 6 years' time. I mean, given we're in November, close to 5 years' time. And as I've covered in past videos, Ed Miliband, as soon as he got in, basically had to write to the Department for Energy exactly how this was actually going to be possible. In other words, he literally had a pie-in-the-sky idea and had to write to his own department to effectively ask, how can we actually do this? Can we have a cost-benefit analysis? Despite the fact that pretty much through all public information, and given that Labour actually has money allocated to it by the Houses of Parliament to do any sort of research that they want, Ed Miliband didn't in advance actually try and understand what he could do. He just said he could do it. And so a few days ago, he sent out this thread to Twitter. Today we have received an independent advice from Neso Energy on our clean power mission. The report provides conclusive proof that clean power by 2030 is not only achievable but desirable and can lead to cheaper electricity and a more secure system for Britain. Now, already I have a number of issues with this. One, I know that it will not lead to cheaper energy, just from the things I know, but we'll get into it. Secure energy for Britain, what they mean by that really is we won't be reliant on foreign imports of oil and gas, which another way to secure Britain's energy is by extracting our own oil and gas, which maniacs like Ed Miliband have stopped us from doing. And of course, clean power by 2030, I mean, we'll get into all this. Firstly, though, there's an important point that needs to be made as to why you should never trust Ed Miliband. Because people went onto Companies House, the UK's own government website that gives you all public information about all companies registered with the government, and people easily found out that NESO, the National Energy System Operators Limited, recently was actually nationalised by the government, and the overall person in charge, or the person with significant control, is the Secretary of State for Energy Security and Net Zero. In other words, Ed Miliband owns NESO. So as pointed out by Clarissa here, Ed Miliband is marking his own homework. He is the only person with significant control in NESO's company house listings, and that effectively means that in no way can he call this independent. So, without even going into any of the facts or statements that he has made and trying to verify them, already Ed Miliband is lying about this being an independent report. It can't be. He controls the company that made the report. That is by definition not independent. And so with that, I could probably say, leave it there. I've proved that Ed Miliband is a massive liar and you can't trust anything he says. But no, I like to go into more detail than that. So back to Ed Miliband, he continues saying, recent years have shown the consequences of our overexposure to volatile fossil fuel markets. As prices went up, working people paid the price, never again. I mean, businesses paid the price as well. Businesses pay for energy too. And yes, this is largely because all oil and gas has to be sold on the world market, and naturally, we import most of ours. The thing is that we're actually quite unaffected by the whole Russia-Ukraine thing. I think something like 3% of our oil and gas is actually dependent on Russia. The rest of it's all basically comes from America and Norway and some from the Middle East, but it's mostly, our neighbouring countries we get them from. And of course we extract some ourselves, but that could be expanded. But no, we've got idiots in charge. 3. Our clean power mission will replace our dependency on unstable fossil fuels with clean, homegrown power. The Tories offer a recipe for defeatism and dependency. No, they didn't. Rishi Sunak actually did a pretty good thing in expanding the oil and gas licences. That was fine for the North Sea. They stopped fracking, and Liz Truss was going to save us from that mental policy, but I suppose the good part of it is, once we actually do get past peak gas, we can start actually extracting via fracking, and we end up selling gas at higher prices. So maybe it's actually a big brain move by Sunak and Labour to not frack yet. We'll take the difficult decisions to deliver our mission and provide working people the security they deserve. Exactly what's going to happen when the wind isn't blowing and the sun isn't shining, I'm not sure, but this is why we're going to get into it. We will build the energy projects and infrastructure needed across the country. We've already lifted the onshore wind ban and consented enough solar to power hundreds of thousands of homes. We will continue to back the builders and support investors to make this happen. Onshore wind I don't really have an issue with particularly. If they do put it on bird migration paths, they can literally just put a black arm on one of the arms of the wind turbine, and birds tend to actually avoid that, so it won't kill as many birds as people are worried about. When it comes to replacing farmland with solar fields, main reason I'm against them, I don't like the look of them. As far as I'm aware, you can still use it as grazing field, so it's not a total waste to the farmer, but it still seems absurd to me that they're doing that rather than putting it on rooftops, but that's just me. Number 5, the prize on offer for our country is huge. Energy security, cheaper power, thousands of jobs, wealth for Britain. Every family and business deserves affordable, secure power. That is what we will deliver with our mission for clean power. Well, we are going to get into some of these claims. So first things first, amazingly, what this report has found is that to actually get to net zero or full green energy, whatever they're calling it, by 2030, over the next 5 years, it's either going to cost just under £50 billion per year for 5 years, which equates to just under £300 billion, which is rivaling the same amount of money for 1 year spending on the NHS. And that's if they go for the full green, we're only going to have wind power, solar power and some nuclear, which they're claiming will be a net exporter, but I have my doubts on that. Or if they go for the frankly less mental option, where they still rely on some oil and gas, they just capture the carbon dioxide and store it underground, along with a more methodical and slow-paced rollout of renewable, or more renewables I should say, that costs about £44 billion, equating to just over £250 billion over 5 years. Again, still an awful lot of money. And given that borrowing has already just got more expensive and the tax burden is literally higher than it has ever been in Britain, you kind of have to wonder where you're going to get nearly £50 billion from a year, because there's going to be overhead to this as well. And the answer is frankly from nowhere. So already this is unaffordable. There's no way you are getting £50 million directly from either the taxpayer or borrowing. You're going to crash the economy just by doing this. And in fact, frankly, the economy is still in a worse shape than when Liz Truss took over. Bond market yields are higher than they were under Liz Truss still. The pound is still pretty weak. And trying to just gather £50 billion from somewhere, anywhere, obviously that's going to devalue it more. They're probably going to have to print money for this. And obviously the way they're going to say, oh, technically your bills will be cheaper is effectively by raising all other taxes. So while your energy bill, sure, might not go up, you'll realise that you're probably going to be paying 60% taxes rather than 40%. And at the same time here, they're trying to say, oh, well, with Donald Trump now not going for the green agenda, that's a massive gap in the market for us. Okay, we've been world leading when it comes to reducing our CO2 emissions, and we've ended up with the highest energy bills pretty much in the world. Basically what we have to show for this is that, and with Germany as well by the way, going for the green agenda is absolutely disastrous. It leads to one of two things: high energy bills or pumping out more carbon dioxide than you did before. We went for the high energy bills route, nobody is happy. Another thing that the report points out is that to actually make this a reality, they're probably going to have to start encouraging some energy rationing. Now that might be an uncharitable take here, but if you take a look at this graph, apologies for the Nickelback reference, you'll see that for their plan over the next 5 years, they want to reduce total annual demand for residential, that's power you use in your home, while with industrial and commercial growth they're expecting more power demand, and then for road transport, because they want to electrify everything, they want you to effectively make sacrifices in your own home to allow for more electrified rail, buses, all the malarkey like that. While at the same time, by the way, they have policy that includes effectively forcing you to buy electric cars. Well, you're going to have to charge that. That'll come under residential. They're banning gas boilers, again heat pumps. That's going to take electricity because you don't use gas anymore. And so it really doesn't come as a shock that effectively I think this graph is absolutely moronic. There is absolutely no way on earth that you are forcing, not just encouraging, but forcing every house in the country to have a heat pump. I think at the moment they're just saying it's new builds that require a heat pump and can't have gas boilers. That's not going to remain. These people are mental. They are going to force you to get rid of your gas boiler. that probably will happen. They're going to ban the sale of petrol and diesel cars earlier than even Boris Johnson wanted to. He wanted the ban of that done in 2030. They already have every 1 in 4 cars you sell needs to be an electric car. They're going to ramp that up, probably to 1 in 3, probably to 1 in 2 at some point. Again, this all requires massive infrastructure change that we don't have the money for, but also this infrastructure change requires that you use less electricity while buying all this stuff, being required to buy this stuff that needs more electricity. This is absolutely nuts. I think you've got to realise as well, actually, is that the detail here just blows my mind. So bear in mind that they're expecting effectively an entire new year's worth of NHS funding to reach an 11% increased demand from 2023. They only expect to actually be able to supply Britain if its electricity demand increased by 11%. Again, while expecting pretty much every home in the country to have an electric car or two and also have a heat pump, both of which, while energy efficient, more so than internal combustion engines and gas boilers, still require a hell of a lot more electricity than both, while not being fueled by oil and gas. You know, this is in a time where people are demanding data centres, which are effectively energy siphons, where industry and manufacturing are making a bit of a bounce back in especially America, but also in Europe, because it turns out outsourcing it all to China is really not good for our defence and national interests. So we want all that back as well, and apparently we can only actually be able to increase electricity demand by 11% because we need to ration other electricity for residential demand. Again, this is just nuts. And the language gets very questionable in other parts of this report. Our clean power pathways see a 4 to 5-fold increase in demand flexibility, excluding storage heaters. And so I looked for what they meant by demand flexibility, and well, here's what I found. The advent of smart technology, electric vehicles and electrified heating provides new ways for consumers to engage with the energy system and cut their costs by flexing their demand. What this is effectively a nice way of saying we want you to ration your energy, but we're not making it nanny state like, you know, you have stamps that you throw into your meter or whatever. No, this is the futuristic dystopia now. You've got smart technology, and trust me, they're probably going to look to control it when people don't do this. These opportunities will differ across households, requiring well-designed policy to ensure no consumers are left behind and the transition is affordable and fair for all. Levels of demand flexibility, excluding storage heaters, can increase by 4 to 5 times to 2030, with significant benefits for the transition to clean power by moving energy demand away from peak periods. Yes. So this is going to be the type of thing where you get paid to charge your car at night when people aren't really using electricity, using your washing machine early in the morning when people aren't using electricity as much, maybe at 2 o'clock in the afternoon when people have stopped cooking lunch and are going back to work using low consumption things such as laptops. This is the type of thing you're going to see. By 2030, demand flexibility in our pathways reaches 10 to 12 gigawatts through smart charging of electric vehicles, time-shifting household demand, and you have to change your habits for the good of the state, citizen, and enabling more responsive industrial demand with a further 4 gigawatts from storage heating. So to increase demand flexibility, it requires consumer engagement. It needs to be effortless participation in demand flexibility through digitisation and automation. That is likely to be the best path to the highest and most effective levels of responsiveness. Must be affordable and accessible for all consumers to ensure a fair transition to maintain public support. Very brave new world. This is the type of dystopia where you kind of enjoy being part of it. I know people who have smart meters and they almost gamify the whole thing. it's kind of gross, where they have minute-to-minute understandings of their energy consumption and they effectively try and min-max their bills. When in reality, we don't need to be in a world like that if we just had a sensible energy policy and didn't have the highest electricity prices pretty much in the world. Virtually all the demand-side flexibility will be connected into the distribution network, providing flexibility through the network. Most of the demand flexibility will be enabled by automation and digitization from a growth in smart appliances and implementation of the Energy Smart Appliances regulation in the government's Smart Secure Energy System programme and the Electric Vehicle Smart Charge Points 2021 regulations, which require chargers installed after this date to default to off-peak charging. So yeah, we've all got electric vehicles, and if you run out of charging it for whatever reason, it won't charge during peak times. So no matter what you're doing, you can't charge your car, you're not allowed to, you're in peak demand, citizen. It is for the good of the nation that you cannot charge your car that can only manage about 50 miles. To increase participation in smart technologies, demand-side flexibility, innovative tariffs and other retail market offerings will be needed. Yeah, so effectively, and this is the point I'm going to try and make, it's only in a very technical sense that we will have lower energy bills. It will basically only be true in off-peak times from the looks of this, because unless you are more flexible with your demand, i.e. we are going to force you to ration, because otherwise your energy bills will be higher. It's this sort of thing where they are lying to you. This will only be cheaper if you kind of play the system, if you don't charge your forced ownership of the electric vehicle to charge when you may need it, if you only do your washing at 11 at night when you don't really feel like doing your washing or ironing. And then obviously you can't put your clothes outside on the washing line because it's pitch black and not warm enough. This is the future of cheaper bills, according to Ed Miliband. It's you need to do all the most inconvenient things possible because it is for the good of the nation and for the good of net zero. I guarantee you people will not be happy with this when they realise that is what it means. The thing is as well is that this report admits that this is actually quite a bit of a gamble. If you look at this graph, don't worry, it's a bit intimidating, but I'll go through it with you. So this graph is their expected energy generation mix, and as shown in the graph before, they are expecting to need just under 400 terawatt hours to be supplied in 2030. So this is the graph explaining how they're going to manage it. So on the left hand side, it's how things are at the moment. We are about 180 terawatt hours generating from low carbon generation mix. That's your renewables, your nuclear, etc. This is then made up by fossil fuels, and then obviously we make the rest up by imports, mainly from France, but also from Belgium, Denmark and Norway. If you look on the right hand side, that is what the NESO are expecting from power generation with their plan, which is massively expanded onshore, offshore and solar generation. And as you can see from point 8, they are also expecting that, we're going to make too much from this, so we're going to have to export it. The problem is that if you look at point 5, they are expecting, obviously, electricity demand to grow, and that is going to have to be made up by quote-unquote other renewables, whatever they are, and nuclear. And effectively what they are banking on is nuclear will make up the shortfall. The problem is that we have been way behind with nuclear in the UK because Nick Clegg said, what's the point of building nuclear power plants in 2010? We're not going to use it until 2022, and it is now 2024. So with that, they are expecting 30-year-old power plants that they are coming up for maintenance in the next few years to make up with or for the electricity demand growth that they are expecting, or they are expecting the Hinkley Point C, these new nuclear power plants, to be online in time, which, given the way the UK works, I don't have high hopes for. And so they're actually admitting here that this is actually a bit of a gamble, and in fact we are probably going to see blackouts with this plan if the nuclear option is not available for us to use to have firm power. Especially when we've had the past week in the UK that we have seen, where there has been basically no wind and no sun. That's not even a joke, by the way. This is the numbers we've had for the past week of energy generation. Half of it has to come from gas, because we've had 2 days of sunlight and the wind has not been blowing as much as we were expecting. And that's just from domestic generation, by the way. 10% of our power came from interconnectors with Norway and France. We had to literally import their power because this is where we're up to already with renewables, with the net zero plan, which was implemented by the Tories, and Ed Miliband wants to expand that. So if we get a day where there's no wind blowing and there's no sunshine, like, are we really expecting the expansion of batteries to help with that? It's only 22 gigawatts they're expecting. That can't last for a week. It's not going to happen. Hence, they acknowledge the need for rationing, amazingly. But the thing is, and this is the really, really surprising part, they basically admit in this graph that energy prices are actually going to go up. This is the pounds per megawatt hour that the consumer will be paying. The counterfactual is effectively what we have now. As you can see, it's about £1.20 per megawatt hour. You go to the new dispatch, which is the massively expanded renewable strategy, it goes up to about £1.30. And then you go to the best of both worlds, if you can call it that, with the carbon capture storage side of things, it goes up to nearly £1.40. And with a minimum, by the way, of £1.33. So the thing is here is the black line is what they are expecting people to pay. As you can see there, £1.18 per megawatt hour for what we have now, goes up to £1.26 when it comes to the full-on Loonly green agenda, and then best of both worlds, it goes up the most to £1.33. So this graph is actually showing that no, your energy bills are going up. Your energy bills are unironically going up. And I suppose you might be saying, oh, well, the exports might bring them down. No, the exports are, the exports are taken account of in this graph. They're expecting a 2 pence off your energy bills for all the exporting we'll be doing. Effectively, what we're doing is putting up your taxes and then putting up your average bills, because Ed Miliband wants to say, you see that bit at the top, the max sensitivity? We've brought that down by a whole 10 pence. So if you have Ed Miliband's full-on dream world, your average price goes up by 8 pence, and then in worst case scenario, your prices will be actually reduced by 10 pence. Which, if the Ukraine war is anything to go off, only affects people for a few months. What effectively this is saying is that not only is this going to cost the taxpayer and government an awful lot of money through borrowing, taxing and money printing, it's going to cost the consumer even more. There's no benefit to any of this unless you think you are genuinely saving the world via reducing carbon emissions, which anyone worth their salt knows is not the case. Every country in the world that is apparently at threat to raising sea levels is still building airports. Nobody really believes they're going to die. And then when it does come to modern natural disasters that are blamed on climate change, it turns out, oh, look at Spain. Oh, they got rid of a load of dams that help with flood risk. They got rid of a load thanks to the EU. And they're blaming it on climate change. And then you end up with mental things like this, where it turns out, oh, it's actually going to cost you more on average. Alright, if there's another Ukraine war, we might save some money, but you're gambling an awful lot for worst case scenario, which frankly is never what a government should do. But honestly, the most dishonest part of this report is the conclusion. So our analysis describes pathways to a clean power system for Great Britain by 2030 that involve a major investment programme without increasing costs to consumers. They've just lied. That is a lie. That is a full-on lie. I just went through the graph. You admit that we are going to be paying 8 pence more per megawatt hour. You have lied to us. This is only true in worst case scenario where there's some sort of crisis and gas and oil prices go up. But they are few and far between, and they are very temporary. The rest of the time, you're paying lower bills. They have lied to you here. While largely breaking the link with volatile international gas prices, that is the technicality they're getting you on. Oh, we'll be disconnected from gas prices, therefore the volatility won't be in place. Well, most of the volatility's still cheaper. It's only in worst case scenario where it seems to be that we are actually worse off on our current path with our energy policy. Which, guess what? Worst case scenario rarely happens. As well as being a major direct contributor to UK carbon targets, it would enable accelerated progress in other sectors, and it would involve development of... They started a sentence with an "and" there. You never start a sentence with an "and", obviously, anyway. Development of the tools, policies, momentum to drive through 2030 to meet ongoing challenges ahead. That includes rationing, by the way. Oh, this is how we're going to keep your energy bills down. We're going to force you to ration. This report has set out potential pathways for clean power. The government will now reflect on those pathways and put forward its own plan. Then the hard work will begin to deliver that against a plan while ensuring good value for consumers, developing opportunities across the country and building public transport and support for clean power mission, all while apparently reducing residential demand. Again, they're going to do that through rationing. Just to be absolutely clear here, I don't think I could have actually written a more dishonest conclusion myself. The dishonesty comes from what they don't mention. They say that it will have a positive impact on consumer prices, but only if gas prices go way above what they are expected to go to in the worst case scenario. And if your government policy is let's only prepare for the worst case scenarios, you're never going to have a functioning government, which is proven by the fact that our government is currently not particularly functioning very well. But this is the thing, Ed Miliband will have seen this report, literally told these people, given his director of the company, only give me positive conclusions. When you go into the detail, it turns out, my god, this is horrible, but in the conclusion they don't say any of that, and they just say, yeah, this is our report, now it's up to the government what we do, which isn't what a conclusion's supposed to say. A conclusion's supposed to say, oh, here's the costs, here's the benefits, we found that actually we're going to have to be authoritarian loonies to stop people from charging their electric vehicles that we force them to buy, so that demand can come down because we can't actually provide the energy that we've promised, or while actually increasing the average prices for consumers. That is what the conclusion should say, and it doesn't, because this is not an independent report. This is something that Ed Miliband can show to the normie and say, look at that, we've done the independent report, this is actually the best way forward. When the report itself actually says, no, well, it depends actually on what outcomes you want, but just saying we're going to make everything more expensive for you to save the planet is not going to convince many people when many people feel like that they are going to starve to death with that news. But this is the thing, Ed Miliband's doubling down on all this. It's COP29 this week, and this was Ed Miliband's really cringe public service announcement about going there.
Have you ever played 193-dimensional chess? That's what I was doing back in 2009 at the Copenhagen Climate Summit.
Ed Miliband, once you are voted finally out of Parliament, I need you to never be in the public eye again. I am self-aware that I am cringe. You are pure, unadulterated black goo cringe. Please never try and make these jokes again.
Trying to get 193 countries to reach agreement. Yes, it's true, I did look younger then.
There's been a lot of word going around that a lot of people describe this government as student union politics. Things like this are exactly the type of thing that I saw in my student union, and it made me never want to set foot in a uni again. And now my entire country is run like that.
I'm about to go and do it again in Azerbaijan at COP29. But why? Because it's the once-a-year chance to put world leaders on the spot to act on climate change.
I mean, good luck with that, because the leader of Azerbaijan said that oil and gas are a gift from God. I think you're going to struggle to convince these people to go to net zero, especially if any of them even take a slight look at the reports that you are claiming says that we'll have cheaper energy bills.
And at this year's COP, you'll have a British government representing you that believes in doing its bit at home and showing leadership abroad.
You get the point here. Once again, he is more of a travelling salesman than he is an energy secretary. Let's just get to the money shot.
Everything we're doing in Britain, from Great British Energy to our Clean Power Plan, is about lower bills, energy security, jobs and growth.
It's amazing. The report found that certainly the first two are actually incorrect. It's jobs and growth that's fairly questionable. I mean, I didn't bother getting into it because typically these reports say, oh, this will create all these jobs, but then they never look at the opportunity cost of, oh, but it will cost these jobs in the oil and gas sector. So I didn't bother going into it. But fact of the matter is, they admit it's a massive gamble on the energy security front. It's probably not going to work out. They obviously didn't look into specifically what the risk of that is going to be in terms of, oh, there's a 20% chance that it fails. So I'm just going to go ahead and say, no, they have not banked on energy security, therefore they have not banked on jobs and growth. And lower prices is just a lie. It's only true if we are in worst case scenario consistently for 5 years. We're not even in worst case scenario anymore. So yeah, Ed Miliband's taken this report and is running on it, and there's nothing in the media about this being Ed Miliband's own company where he has significant control. There's nothing in the media about him lying about the fact that your average prices are actually going to go up. Hence I'm making this video, because I need to just directly tell you, Ed Miliband is lying. He is lying here.
But if we're going to keep future generations safe from the threat of climate change, we've also got to work with other countries. This government believes climate security is national security. That's why I'll be going to COP29 to play climate chess and fight for Britain.
Yeah, it's nothing short of embarrassing, this clip. I'm kind of sorry that I showed you it, but I need to show you we have student union politics in our government at the moment. And as I say, they are relying on other countries that are saying that oil and gas are a gift from God to effectively give up that gift from God to have the highest energy prices in the world and energy security that they can't even guarantee unless nuclear goes well, which we're something like 30 years behind. So, that's where we are at the moment. And the thing is, as I say, Ed Miliband just keeps doubling down. Here he is on Good Morning Britain, trying again to defend the report.
We set that out for 2030. It was an independent set of modelling that said that bills could go down by up to £300.
Okay, number one, obviously the report isn't independent, Mr. Ed Miliband. You literally have significant control of the company that made the report. I've just done a Control F on the report and can't find anything to do with £300, let alone reducing bills by that much. The only part of this report where I can see there is a direct claim that it will reduce the prices is the very odd assertion that when subsidies for renewables come to the end of their contracts, there may be need for new subsidies at lesser rates, but these will lead to cheaper production of electricity, which will lead to lower costs. Which I assume their argument there is because the new subsidies will be even less than they were, we can therefore use less of the public purse to pay for them, while at the same time, at least when the wind blows, provide you with cheaper electricity. But again, it's really weird how they will go through all this, oh, look at all this volatility that gas and oil can go through if Ukraine has a war. Yet they never talk about the fact that you just have no electricity generation when the wind isn't blowing. This isn't the only part. This section also mentions that they are looking to reduce bills by improving energy efficiency of houses. That includes better light bulbs, probably better insulation. These things apparently can see usage drop by about 5 to 10%, so you'll have lower bills by 5 to 10% because you'll use less energy overall. Not a terrible investment, probably. My issue with that is that that's only generally used by government funds for council houses, yet for people who own privately or have a mortgage, they need to drop their own money into this, which, again, okay, in the long term it might save you money. In the short term, though, that's a hell of a lot of saving. And then this third paragraph is what I explained before about, oh, when gas and oil prices spike, then it will be even more expensive. At those times, the options that we are putting forward in this report will be cheaper. And again, that is all Ed Miliband is saying here. Because as you can see, they say as a result, the electricity price cap for 2023 was £150 to £200 per megawatt hour higher than implied by a system cost analysis akin to those in this chapter. In other words, it wasn't £300 cheaper, it was at most £200 cheaper. And again, that is making the assumption that the wind is blowing at the time, which, as I have been saying, hasn't happened for the past week in Britain, and neither have we had sun. So as I say, everything Ed Miliband is saying is a lie.
And what's important, Susanna, is that the report I referred to last week from the energy system operator confirms that not only is our target achievable, but it will lead to lower costs of electricity.
Only when there is an oil and gas crisis that are few and far between. And again, if a main thing that they want to do is export energy, guess what's really useful for being exported? Oh, oil and gas. So why don't we frack and drill for oil in the North Sea? I mean, Ed Miliband's come under fire because the Falklands, due to the fact that they are a overseas territory, actually have their own governments, that the only way that Parliament actually gets involved is to give them defence and foreign affairs help. That's it. So because of that, they don't have net zero mentality, and therefore they are just going ahead and tapping into all the oil and gas that is surrounding their island. Because why wouldn't they? That would make them unbelievably rich.
This is really, really important. It is the big change that I was talking to Richard about. It's a change that renewables are now cheaper than fossil fuels.
Again, they always screw about with statistics here. It's technically true, but it's only true when they're generating electricity. So, you know, with solar they can only do it in the day, wind they can only do it when it's windy. But they never take into account that you then need to pay the premium for the oil and gas backup. And so oil and gas, you know, they're working consistently, and then when they're used as backup, obviously there's a bit of a price spike, and, you know, they count that price spike as part of the oil and gas prices. So it's one of those things where you can prove anything with statistics. I mean, yeah, it's technically true, but now we need to look at reliability, and they're only somewhat reliable, not to the extent, obviously, where it takes a switch to turn on your gas power station.
And what's crucial also is it's not just cheaper, but it gives us more security.
Okay,
because what we saw when Russia invaded Ukraine was prices going through the roof.
I mean, at this point you get all the arguments, so I'm just going to leave the clip there. But again, the energy security thing isn't even necessarily true. We were fine with the supply of oil and gas. 3% of it came from Russia, if that. The problem was obviously, as he says, the energy price spiked. Okay, guess what would help with that? Adding our own supply to the global market. That would help reduce that spike. Like it did. Was there any part of the report that looked into that? No, of course there wasn't, because the report was commissioned by Ed Miliband to effectively say, find everything you can to prove me right. You look in the detail, it found everything they could to prove him wrong, and then looked at two very specific points to say, oh look, this is where there will be improvement, when there's another Russian invasion, which I don't think is happening anytime soon. So I think with that, I think I have thoroughly gone through why Ed Miliband is a liar, why you should not trust him, and why you should absolutely never vote Labour again in your life. So with that, it's shill time. It is the final episode of Dustborn this week. I promise it will actually be the end of it today. I know I've promised it for like 2 weeks, but hey, my co-host up and vanished, but he's back now. Next Monday, it's the Antiquity stream. We're carrying on with the Peloponnesian War. Tuesday, it's Tosh News, and I do believe it's going to be the same day as the farmers' strike, so I think there's going to be plenty of news on that for that day. And then Laughing at the Guardian, of course, will return next Saturday as well. Videos out as and when I can make them. So with that, I think that's everything I had for you for today. Please do subscribe, become a channel member, send super chats and super thanks. They all really do help the channel out. And with that, that's everything I had for you for today. So once again, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.